If you would have told me 4 years ago the studio would make a third-person shooter that had Souls-like elements and procedural world generation, I would have honestly said that sounds too good to be true. And while the first Remnant from the Ashes wasn't perfect, it was really nice to be surprised because that game got a lot of things right. Enter present day, and we now have a sequel to that genre mashup that worked so well. But what makes a sequel really worth your time? You need to respect the original title, but also evolve it in any number of ways to make it feel fresh and new to both returning players, but also worthy for any new player to pick up. Typically it's done by taking things to the next level, like graphics, game systems, combat, maybe even a new story. Well, I am happy to tell you that Remnant 2 has delivered a worthy sequel, and it continues to surprise me with challenge and joy, even after more than 40 hours. So let's dive in to my review for Remnant 2. You start with a basic intro mission and tutorial to get new and veteran players up to speed. After that, it doesn't take long to get to Ward 13, the central hub for Remnant 2. This small area is nearly all that remains of humanity's last refuge after the devastation of the Root. Without spoiling too much of the story, you'll be seeing other worlds, but if you want to catch up on the original story, you might check out a recap video to be a bit more up to speed if lore and story is your thing. After some NPC introductions around Ward 13, your first task will be picking your starting archetype, basically a class. The starting 4 options are Medic, Gunslinger, Handler, and Challenger. The Medic will bring healing options, obviously. The Handler has a pet that helps with solo play. The Hunter is all about long-range marksmanship, and the Challenger isn't afraid to get up close. Each archetype has a powerful, passive prime perk that will really define the class. You will also get to choose between one of 3 different active skills that you can use in combat, and 4 perks that will unlock as you level up each archetype. Each archetype will also have a single trait that will increase in tier level as that archetype levels up as well. But once it is maxed out, you actually unlock it as an option to put trait points into, even if you choose to run a different archetype. To make your character even more unique, at a middle point in your campaign playthrough, you'll be given the option to add a secondary archetype with nearly all the benefits of the first, except the prime perk will not be active. And, without saying too much, there are way more than 4 of these archetypes, and possible combinations go far beyond 100 different pairings, so mix and match to your heart's content. This archetype choice will give you your basic starting gear for that class, but you'll upgrade and use many other things over time. I'll get to gear a bit later. Now, I'm not going to claim to be a Remnant lore expert, but Remnant 2 takes place some years after the first game and DLC events have transpired. If you're looking to get a history lesson, I'd probably check out the first game, or at least watch a recap if you can find one of those. So you're going to go on a bit of a walk with Ford, who eventually takes you to the world crystal that he wants to turn back on. Apparently it's been off for a bit. And being left with minimal choice after a few events transpire, you yourself use the world crystal to try and follow the others who were just taken to other realms. And by that, I mean you will head to a different realm. And I honestly can't tell you which realm you'll start in. That's the cool thing about Remnant 2. The number of dice you'll roll when starting each realm are a lot more than you might expect. Just in that first realm alone, you could see a different world layout, enemy types, realm story arc, side dungeons, secrets, and more. All of these options give the game a great amount of replayability, which is very refreshing. I know someone else who reviewed this, and we weren't even close on what we faced after leaving Ward 13. Now, you will have a few consistent story beats to experience on your overall campaign playthrough, but it will likely be a mostly unique total package for each different player. Also, have you ever been faced with a dialogue option in a game, hoping to make a spicy choice to get the lead to a confrontation? Or maybe you just don't want to be the good guy, and yet it all means very little in the end? Well, these realms will give you choices to make, some big and some small, but refreshingly, they do in fact make a difference. I don't want to spoil them, but even testing a fresh alternate character for some footage, I made a choice that seemed like the path less traveled, you could say, and I chuckled out loud at the way events played out after that choice transpired. There are other surprises which I'll leave for you to figure out, but let's just say you might want to take a second to consider which choices you make, because if there's an alternate action, it very well may have a different outcome. None of the choices are really wrong, and I don't think they will give you an alternate ending of the campaign, at least right now. But it's nice to see when forks are in the road, things do actually play out differently. So you've got worlds that give you many different options, but I will also say that I appreciate the fact that exploration is typically rewarded, which is good because it means future replays stay fresh. Maybe it's a chest with some materials you find down a dark alley to help you upgrade something, but also it could be an entire side dungeon or zone that is entirely optional and you could have just as easily missed it. Now, you never know if you'll find a sick boss or unique item you may end up using for a long time if you don't peek and see what's behind door number 1. There is also a ton of lore for each world buried in the books that you'll find all around each realm. The writers and world designers put some real effort into these realms that you'll be exploring, and these books hold quite a lot of information. So if you want, take some time to read them, and you never know what they're going to help you with. This brings me to another cool feature, and they are what I would call puzzles or mysteries. Not something you'd expect in a third-person shooter at first mention of the genre. I was pleasantly surprised by these breaks in combat to stretch my brain a bit, as it's good to see a game challenge the player in more ways than just combat skill. They're not a full-on Zelda water temple level of intricate, but I can't tell you the last time I thought this deeply about a move in a tic-tac-toe style game. Albeit this version is a little more twisted than what you grew up playing. If you take the time to figure these out, they will likely give you a unique reward that you'd never have come across otherwise. And it might just be something to really max out a build or change a playstyle depending on what it is. And since the internet hasn't devoured this game yet, I will be curious to see how many secrets players eventually find once the game has been fully dissected. Hey, Ebontis, hello! You've been talking a long time about everything but combat in a third-person shooter. Is there a reason for that? Nope. Here goes combat. Now, the reason combat feels so action-packed is the weapons themselves. Now, I'm sitting at a firing range just to show you a quick little demo, but you've got some unique features to weapons. You're going to have, each weapon will have a mod slot, whether it's locked in from a boss weapon that you've crafted. You won't be able to change those. Some mods you'll have unlocked, and you can literally switch those freely at will. And then you're also going to have mutators, kind of stat tweaks or little bonuses that you can put on. And eventually, if you level those up to level 10, they get kind of a nice little bonus feature. Now, this is like an AR-47, so kind of an AK-47. But you'll notice, like, depending on what mod I put on there, depending on what's going on, it's kind of going to change the look and a couple other things about the weapon. But it is going to feel pretty good. The weapons have good weight to them, which I do appreciate. And they are very unique. And also, again, when you get some of these modifiers involved, this is kinetic tremors. And you'll notice it sends out this shockwave to 9 meters, blasts 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Lasts a while. I'm still able to do everything I'm able to do while I'm working it down. You'll see the gauge fill up. I've got another one up. I can fire it out and I can keep going. So that thing's working. Covers a nice little area of effect. That is why combat feels so good in this game, is because the variety of combat that you're able to basically have with your loadout, your mutators, your mods, you can really develop something for a playstyle. So I've got my handler here, so I've actually got my dog with me, so he's able to give me support healing. Maybe he's out there and he's going to be able to go attack the targets. You guys can see that. It's like I can call him back. I can call him to a certain point. There we go. He's back. And then I'm good. So it's like just the fact that You've got this, you've got challengers, you've got so many different things that you can do. I mean, my abilities here in combat from the challenger, the shockwave mod, is honestly like, it's potent. It'll hit pretty solid, and you really have a lot of ways to tackle combat. And then you get some crazy weapons like this. This is a cube gun. This fires bullets that ricochet back, so basically you just have to manage your overheating category. Come here, bud. You can get crits and everything like that, and then it gets even crazier. So now I've got a shield. If I was actually taking damage, it would actually be absorbing a certain amount of damage. And then if I want, I can send this thing out if it's as like an attack shield doing damage. And if it's taking damage, it's going to do more as I send it out. Like, this is one of the random boss guns. There's some very cool ones. I don't want to spoil them for you, but I do want to show you guys, like, the weapons in Remnant are some of the more unique things. The reload animations are generally pretty cool. I mean, yeah, your normal weapon's going to be good, but I mean, this thing right here, just looking at the animation while it fires, Remnant really does a great job with their weapons. They're all unique. They kind of have their own style and flavor to them. So when you spend some time with the weapons, you might find a certain one that you love or goes with your playstyle, but there's a lot of really good ones out there, so feel free to experiment as much as you can. There's a ton of fun options here. With your newly customized arsenal, you'll be ready for all sorts of challenges. The enemies that you'll be facing come in a few varieties. Basic rank and file enemies don't usually present too much of a challenge at lower difficulties, unless of course you let yourself get overwhelmed or caught off guard when they flank you, which they tend to do all the time. If you fire your weapon, the surrounding area will hear you, so keep your head on a swivel until you're sure things are clear. Next are elite enemies, which come with a change in music, so make sure you aren't playing muted because these audio cues actually come in very handy. These enemies will have chunkier health bars and usually multiple powerful and unique attacks that you'll need to learn how to avoid. This will probably be a good time to use any mods on your weapons, give you that alternate fire, switch over to something that hits pretty heavy, and really watch the timing of those dodges because these guys will hit hard and hit you in different ways than you're used to. So take a minute, learn the fights, and these elites definitely mix it up on you. Then we have the bosses, which are a definite highlight in the game. So far, I would call them tough, but fair when I think about them a bit more objectively. In the moments while fighting them, sure, there are moments I wanted to curse out loud as I kept dying. And at higher difficulties, I'm sure that happens all the time. But if I'm honest with myself, it's more often than not my fault for playing poorly and not learning the mechanics of the fight. I can't think of a truly bad or cheap boss design, at least on the two lower difficulties. Again, mileage may vary at higher difficulties, so take this with a grain of salt if you're trying it on hard mode. I won't spoil any of these encounters, but to say this game has some of the cooler boss fights I've faced in quite a long time really upped my enjoyment of the overall game. I have no doubt everyone will have a few fist pump moments when you clear that boss, whichever it is for you. Alright, so I've raved about a lot of things in Remnant 2, and I'll be honest, the game is fantastic in a lot of ways. There are a couple small gripes that I do have though, and the first one's really minor. Like, if you're going over to a vendor, sometimes there's this just odd delay, and I wanted to point it out so maybe you don't think you're crazy either, but maybe you want to talk to this lady, she needs a second, and then she will turn around, and then you can interact with them. Now this guy's ready because I walked by him, but then maybe I come over here and I want to talk to the armor guy. Now this guy at least has the best example. He is a mute, he literally can't talk, so he takes a second to kind of adjust his clipboard, but if I just want to come up and interact, there's this like odd delay that sometimes happens, and I get a little bit of it, but sometimes it's just longer than others. So I just kind of wanted to point it out because it happened enough I noticed it. So that way if it happens to you, just so you know you're not crazy, there's this little weird delay sometimes, and it just added up enough I wanted to mention it. That was all. Now the other odd thing for me is the armor. When it comes to build crafting in this game, it's great. There's a ton of it. Your long gun has so many varieties. The boss weapons are crazy. Your short gun, trust me, there's so many things I haven't shown you. There's a melee weapon I was testing out that does some crazy things. And then you've got the mutators that you can level up and dive into more there. There are 4 different rings, and there's so many I'm not even going to show you what they do, but there's a ton that I found, and there's a ton that I probably still haven't found. Amulets, doing some pretty unique things. Multiple archetypes. Traits. You get high enough in an archetype, you unlock a trait permanently if you want to lean into that one. You've got a relic that can heal you in different ways because, you've got different relic shards that you can, or fragments that you can put in here to lean more into healing or weapon fire rate. Or Maybe you want it to heal not over time, but maybe you just want the normal heal, or maybe you want less heals but have it heal more. Like, you've got so much customization. For me, the armor is just lacking. Now, in the first game, I think armor was probably a little too specialized and almost restrictive. So I think when they swung the pendulum to make sure you had a little more freedom in build crafting, they may have swung it a little too far, possibly in my opinion, when it comes to armor, because armor does a couple things. It has its armor damage mitigation, so it's damage reduction, and it has a weight, and that weight is going to accumulate into whatever your stamina penalty is, which is going to be also how your dodge looks. So if I run around and I have this type of dodge, if my stamina penalty is more, I'm going to have a slow roll and things of that nature, and also more stamina penalties. So you're going to have different builds. Now, the Challenger also helps with weight because he's big and up close, so anything of the weight brackets are going to be less of a factor. So the fact that I've got that guy, maybe it's not as much of an issue. But honestly, even if I had to, I would probably just like change one piece of armor to make sure I'm in the medium category, and then I'd set it and forget it. Now, I will totally say there's bleed resistance, fire, shock, blight, and then of course corrosion. Those could be a massive factor if you play on high difficulty, for example, and a boss is very specialized into, say, shock or certain areas. Maybe that's really, really important. I didn't play at those top levels, so this could have a giant caveat of, if you go into higher difficulty, you need to make sure you have all these armor sets that specialize into certain areas. But for me, on Survivor, on Veteran, even messing around a little bit on Nightmare, I really didn't think about my armor hardly at all. And with a game with so much customization and build crafting to truly make your own character, the fact that armor was kind of something I sat and forgot, I just feel like it was one of those pieces of the whole package that's lacking. While the NPC delays, if you want to call them that, and armor stuff was pretty minor, my main gripe is actually with co-op. Now, you can take this with a grain of salt, as this was pre-release, but I only got to play with a couple others who were reviewing the title, so the sample size is small, but one of my 2 total crashes happened during co-op, of which the other guest to the host also had the exact same game freeze. The host continued along their way, but when the game wasn't frozen, we did notice some rubber banding as well, so there may be some syncing issues possibly. Your mileage may vary, so just a heads up. The other part of co-op was related to group scaling. I played most all of my review solo, it's typically what I do, but I did jump in with my friend on a couple of boss fights. Now, his world level was higher than my character on the first session, so that could have been part of it, but our second time was a bit more level between our characters. He was usually playing on a higher difficulty, so maybe that jump and challenge was throwing me off and it was a get good moment. But being as solo, the game has felt challenging but fair as long as I played smart. This took it to a completely different level. Both guests were knocked out many times on both sessions in nearly one-shot fashion, and the boss's health was much chunkier than before. I didn't get a ton of co-op testing, like a full campaign playthrough as a team, but something about these co-op boss fights felt like the incoming damage to the player and the health pool of the bosses may need looked at once it's in the wild. So again, your experience could be different. I just wanted to give heads up on both the syncing issues and possible scaling woes. If you and a friend play the whole game together and it's perfectly smooth, just chalk it up to some poor testing on my part. I did want to touch on difficulty though, kind of a recommendation, but also kind of a review of the difficulty. I played through the campaign first on Survivor. Now, for me, I've played a lot of Souls games, played through Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, a lot of different ones, played the first Remnant game. There's a lot of, experience when it comes to the action and Souls and 3D shooter genre. Even Division on a high difficulty kind of plays in a little bit here. Survivor felt a little bit too easy for me. Now, I was trying to play for a review and understand and get a feel for a lot of experimentation, but I would say Survivor is going to be actually very well balanced for a lot of players who this is going to be, they're not really Souls players. They just kind of want to do more of the third-person shooter thing, get a little bit into the action combat, but not be completely punished. Survivor is actually going to be really well balanced for that, I think. Veteran is going to be more for your, I've played a lot of Souls games. I punished myself in Remnant 2 and went for crazy builds. Veteran is a really good place to play through your campaign, work on leveling up your first set of weapons, find some decent armor, get a couple archetypes unlocked. Veteran is going to be where you're going to want to go, and I think they balance this one really well too. Anything above that, I haven't touched Apocalypse. More power to anybody who does that one. Haven't got there. Nightmare, I wouldn't recommend starting here, and they even say that because you won't have your archetype unlocked, your weapons won't be unlocked, the enemies are going to be stronger and tougher, and even things just like ammo and sponginess, you're going to have a bit of that feel until you get upgraded. So newer players to the genre, teams who aren't entirely sure how scaling is going and stuff like that, go to Survivor, and I think you're going to have a great time. If you're looking for a challenge to go through and experience the story, but really like engage in combat, be more active, make your bullets count, make your shots count, Veteran is also balanced very well. I think they did great with the difficulty scaling in this one. And my experience, I may have started in the wrong place, but I'm glad I played through both of them. But I think because they're both great starting points, and then when you want New Game Plus out here in Apocalypse, more power to the crazy people, but that's probably not for me today. There is another thing I wanted to point out about Remnant 2, and it's replayability. And I think it's what's going to allow a lot of people to enjoy this game. And it's a lot of stuff I've already mentioned. You've got choices that you can make. You've got different story arcs in these realms that you're going to go visiting. You've got a lot of customization in character and different builds that you can lean into. All of that's going to play into, replaying things. And you've got a couple ways you can do it. You can either re-roll the whole campaign, which is pretty cool because you can play through the campaign, or you can go to adventure mode and you can pick these certain zones, and there's multiple story arcs that you see. There's going to be different zones. There's going to be different secrets that you've got to figure out, and you can literally choose one zone, one difficulty mode, even if you want to go a little harder difficulty mode, and you can do that. So I can have an adventure on Nightmare, and I can have my campaign sitting over here on Veteran difficulty, and you can go through this one, come back to your campaign, still going to be able to do both. So adventure mode plus the rerolls of the campaign are really going to give this game a lot of flexibility in how you replay it. And if you want to focus into one thing or try one area but a little bit harder, I really like what they've done for replayability, so definitely wanted to give them props on this. Now, outside of the co-op issues, I only had one crash during my entire playthrough, and since checkpoints are generally pretty well placed, it really wasn't much of a setback, to be honest. Now, just to clarify, I am playing on PC. I have a 5950X for my CPU and an RTX 3090 graphics card. I had DLSS on balanced, and I was playing at about 4K 60. But generally, it felt pretty smooth the whole time. I didn't have a frame rate counter on there, but since I was recording footage on the same PC I was playing on, the fact that it was pretty smooth almost the entire time, I think it is pretty well optimized from what I can tell from my experience. Again, sample size of 1 here, and I have no idea what consoles will be like, but from what I could see, it did seem to manage everything I threw at it pretty well. So overall, my experience in Remnant 2 offered up a truly worthy sequel, and I think on a 10-point scale, a fair rating is a 9 out of 10. Having enjoyed the original Remnant from the Ashes as much as I did, I wasn't sure where this would land. But honestly, Remnant 2 offered up way more than I expected and keeps surprising me after 40 hours. A fun, challenging, unique, and polished world that allows for so much player choice already ranks it pretty high. But the fact that it didn't overstay its welcome, but allows for a lot of replayability, makes this game something I highly recommend you pick up when it comes out on July 25th. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the alert bell if you want to see future content from me. If you want to come over and check out my streams, you can find me on twitch.tv/Ebontis, or just say hello over on Twitter at Ebontis. Hope you enjoy Remnant as much as I did. Good luck out there, and have fun.